Now join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for showing up. Nice to see you all. Years ago I used to joke and say we just kicked the heat on, so it should warm up any moment. We actually never had heat before. So if you were here for the first time, you were kind of sitting around waiting for the heat to go on. But now we actually have heat, so the heat is on, so you might, warm up a little bit. I'm getting old, so I've started to actually care about people. It happens eventually. It took a while, but it happened. This practice, how's your arm feeling? Speaking of caring about people, how you doing? Yeah. That was a fun way to start New Year's, huh? Yeah. What'd you do?
We just slept at home.
Yeah.
And I wish it was more fun.
That's it. No good stories, nothing.
No good stories.
Yeah.
No.
There's Suzuki Roshi, built San Francisco Zen Center. He would talk in his teachings about pain a lot, but just talking about physical pain at this moment, not the mental, emotional stuff that we all go through, or some of you may go through once in a while. But he would talk about physical pain, and he would say that one of the most beautiful practices of the present moment is physical pain. And it's something that we cannot escape. Sometimes it happens more often than others. But it, if nothing else, brings you exactly to the present moment. When it happens, there is pain. And when we have physical pain, what do we often want to do? Get rid of it. When we have mental, emotional pain, what do we often want to do? Get rid of it. And does that always work? No. So the practice is learning to be with it as it arises. Physical, mental, emotional pain. Doesn't make it fun. Doesn't mean the pain is any less just because you're learning to be with it. But pain will occur. And this practice is trying to figure out how do we deal with the pain when it comes into our life. And I've found for me the Buddhist teachings on impermanence is a really beautiful practice with any sort of pain, physical, mental, or emotional, that the pain will change. It will go away. It could decrease. It could get worse. But either way, it's going to change. And our ability to be with change is really a beautiful practice to begin to integrate into your life. How well do we deal with change? I'll take that as a not so well from pretty much everyone in the room, which is interesting because the Buddha teaches very fundamental core teachings of impermanence. All conditioned phenomena are subject to change. That's just, there are no laws in Buddhism, but that's about as close to, who's the dude who said is that Newton, right? Every action has an opposite, Newton, right? Every action has an opposite and equal reaction. That's like some law of physics, is that right? I'm a psychology guy, so for me to talk physics, am I right? Somebody confirm? Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it, right? So there are no laws in Buddhism, but that's about as close to the laws you're going to get, that everything will change. And this is a problem if we're not okay with change. So, oh, now I understand why you're all here. All right. Anyone here for the first time? Handful of you. Any want to share why? What brings you here? Luck?
Timing.
We just started. You sure? Wait till the hour's up to see how lucky you feel. Yeah. Well, glad you're here. Yeah.
I've been wanting to come for a long time. I've known about this meeting, so I'm afraid to have it today. So
Right on. Glad you're here. Welcome. Anyone else first time want to share why they're here? Yeah.
I did a YouTube deep dive.
And YouTube led you here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right
I have
on.
more than one follower.
Yeah. And all this time I thought there were just 6 people out there watching. Right on. Well, glad. You must be one of the millions of people following us. Anyone else? First time? What brings you here?
My friend from here, but been meditating on and off for a while, and then
Yeah.
I went to find a place as well in San Diego.
Nice. Well, welcome.
Would come to take.
A lot of good places in San Diego to practice. I put this at the bottom of the list and check out everywhere else first, and then if nothing else works out, we're here for you, I promise. All right.
Pretty much the same. I've just been meditating on my own and wanted to have a more consistent practice. So
Nice. Well, welcome. Glad you're here. All right, so we'll start with the meditation practice. For those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Feel free as you are. There's a chat box on your screen. Say hello. A couple things to tell you before we begin, especially for those who might be new. Nothing's going to happen to you. All right, you're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. Don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. For those of you who might be brand new, you're not trying to think nothing, and your mind will not shut off. You're just going to sit. Your mind will race. That's what happens when you're alive and human. And I will say things periodically to help you come back to present moment or to wake you up because you've fallen asleep, which isn't the end of the world, but you're here, so let's try to stay awake. Posture, you want to be comfortable. Often it helps sliding to the front third if you're on a cushion. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, also just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders, hands around the knees or lap, whatever's comfortable. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in. Follow breath in. Breathing out. Follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments of your practice. Just sitting. Breathing. with the body still, rested. And the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. The mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. Realize how you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind. Whatever you're sitting with at this moment has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, hold the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakening. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment is filled with tremendous chaos, conflict, challenges. It's also filled with happiness and joy and celebration. But either way, the present moment is what most of us don't want to sit with. And so we constantly look for something to escape to, or someone to escape to. Meditation and Buddhist practice can also be that thing that people use to escape to. And it's not that. Now, it is a healthier escape than many other choices one may make. But ultimately, escaping to meditation and Buddhism just means you're willing to hold a mirror up and look back at yourself. Because the cause of all of the suffering in your life is in your mind. No one else's. Other people do things that make it incredibly difficult for us to find a peace of heart, peace of mind, and have peace of heart. But it is still our reaction to what's happening around us that determines our emotional state. And so the practice of training the mind, not escaping, but training the mind is learning to be with life as it arises, no matter what gets thrown at you. And to be able to do that with stillness, calmness, quiet, composure is the practice. And that never changes. Buddhism is not some intellectual study. It's not about fancy words, languages, and cultures. It's not about 2,500 years ago and monks and nuns and lamas. It's about you. And how well do you respond to life that happens? That's the question. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Just sitting, breathing, and learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else around you, which is very difficult for most of us. And the more we complicate this practice, the harder that gets. For me, the practice is very simple. And that simple practice is nearly impossible to do. But if we're willing to look very honestly, genuinely, authentically at the nature of our own mind, then we can begin to understand our greed, our anger, and our ignorance. And cut through that with generosity, compassion, and wisdom. So, sounds simple, right? Still feel lucky? So with that, I'll pause. For me, I always really prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. For those who are joining virtually, again, there's a chat box on your screen somewhere. Feel free to say hello, and if you have any questions, put them there. I'll do my best to respond. But we'll open up to questions and use the rest of our brief time this evening for that. Yeah.
I sit at home when I can for 20 minutes in the morning, and one of the things I notice is I'm not looking at a watch, of course, but I feel like halfway through, 20 minutes, halfway through 10 minutes, and my eyelids start to feel heavy. And sometimes I start to feel lightheaded. It's really kind of, it's this very different condition, I almost say like euphoric. And I'm just wondering, is that common? Do you hear that from others? Should I see a doctor or?
Definitely see a doctor. I mean, that's a given, right? We all know that. But so the question, just to paraphrase for those at home or wherever you are virtually, maybe you didn't hear it. You said you often sit at home, usually 20 minutes, about halfway in, 10 minutes in, your eyelids get heavy. Maybe you said eye, not eyelids, but your eyes get heavy, and you said it almost feels euphoric. Is that common? Is it normal? And should you see a doctor? Again, yes, see a doctor. The thing that, for me, when people ask about whatever their experience is, and then that's often followed up with, is that common or normal? Completely irrelevant, meaning whether it's common or normal doesn't mean anything. All that matters is that's your experience. And paying attention to that is important. Now, the second thing is, and I don't think this is where you were, especially when you say euphoric, unless it's, but very often when people sit at home and their eyelids get heavy and things like that, and they start to kind of go wherever, you know what that actually means? You're what? Falling asleep. So again, I'm not saying that's what's happening, but if the eyelids get heavy, right, are you doing an eyes open or eyes closed practice?
Eyes closed.
Okay, well there's your simple change. Open your eyes when you do a meditation practice. Right? For me, my understanding of Buddhist teachings is this practice isn't about having some euphoric sensation. Right? I actually talked about this last night. As I said, I was filling in for Monday night to do a Zen practice. And so I was filling in for Sozui and Robin and Alma and Brother Michael. I was fifth on the list. So I had to, make up a bunch of Zen stuff last night, which was always fun. As a Zen practitioner, I had free range to make up anything I wanted. But I talked about this last night, that people often use the word Zen. It's just one of the most misused words in Buddhism next to karma. But we'll get into that later maybe, where people describe Zen as if it's some blissful thing, right? I was feeling very Zen, right? As if it's a good thing. Zen is not good or bad. Zen is meditation, present moment, knowledge. Zen is not a description. Zen is present moment. That present moment could be euphoric. That present moment could be miserable. But it doesn't change what the present moment is. Now, the Zen practice specifically as well is an eyes open practice, which is why I mentioned that. Because very often, again, I'm not talking to you specifically, but very often when we close our eyes during meditation, we tend to just kind of go places. The mind wanders, we get lost in the thought, we're daydreaming, we're sleeping, whatever it is. But the Zen practice, your eyes are open. Because how do you live your life? Majority of your day. Unless you're a cat or a dog. Eyes open. But for some reason, especially those who are maybe newer to meditation, it's like, okay, I gotta close everything out and close my eyes and go to my little, happy place, like Happy Gilmore style. It's just like, that's an escape. Open your eyes. If you have a spot on the floor, a spot on the wall, a candle, a flower, an incense stick burning, my suggestion is to do a practice with your eyes open. The danger of having these euphoric feelings in meditation is then very often that just creates this sense of craving and desire for euphoria. And so we're like, I gotta meditate to have this euphoric experience. I don't even necessarily enjoy meditation. I don't practice it to enjoy it. I don't practice it to be good at it. I practice it because my head is a freaking mess. And I just want it to try to settle down. And if by default that means I feel more pleasant, great. But sometimes I'll sit and feel worse. Because when you sit in silence, if you got a lot of stuff going on, what are you sitting with? A lot of stuff. And how fun is all of your stuff?
Oh, it's a delight.
It's a delight, I know. Says the dude in the front row so we can hear the teaching sooner, It's so, I'm just a fan, and that is my personal practice, always has been. For 20 years, eyes open, and just watch the paint dry. Yeah. That should kill the euphoria.
Yeah, opposite.
Yeah, I know. It was fun while it lasted. Sorry to ruin it, but yeah, try that. What else? So there's a question here that says, what are core principles of Buddhism to learn more about for those who are new here? So the core principles really, there's a couple ways to put this, but I'll focus on, and I mentioned this briefly, the Four Noble Truths, which is life is filled with dukkha, suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. Doesn't mean all of life sucks, it just means you're going to struggle a lot through your life. Again, if you're sitting here on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, you've already figured that out. The second one is the cause of suffering or the origin of suffering, and this is greed, anger, ignorance. So core principles to practice, we practice generosity to overcome greed, we practice compassion to overcome anger, we practice wisdom to overcome ignorance. The third one is the ending of suffering, cessation of craving, cessation of desire. Very often people say like they're tired of the Four Noble Truths, and it's like, really? Have you mastered cessation of craving? No. Then you better go back to the Four Noble Truths. In fact, the craving to learn something more than the Four Noble Truths is actually deeply why you suffer. Because that's not enough for you. And we spend all of our days feeling like what we have isn't enough. All the people in our lives, all the clothes in our lives, all the food in our lives, all the whatever in our lives. If you're here Tuesday at 7 o'clock, your life is pretty darn good, right? This is the wisdom practice, to have gratitude and appreciation. Coming back to your question, core teachings, and then you get the Eightfold Path. And you can Google Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path on Google for free. First 2 pages, you're good to go, like Google search pages. An Eightfold Path gets into having the correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. This is in essence how you live your daily life. What do you think? What do you say? And what do you do? And then another piece I'll add just to the question is, from a Mahayana Buddhist perspective, we look at what's called the paramitas, and these are loosely translated to perfection, but it's the practice of the bodhisattva. So enlightened beings practice generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. And the beauty of that is that has nothing to do with Buddhism. I mean, it has everything to do with Buddhism and nothing to do with Buddhism. So you can be Christian and Catholic and Muslim and Jewish and Mormon and pagan and whatever religion you are, and still practice generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. Those are the core principles right there. Buddha taught for 45 years the suffering and the ending of suffering. It's that simple. But you must understand why you suffer. So, hope that helps. What else? Questions? Yes.
What do you consider wisdom?
Next question. So the question was, what do you consider wisdom, right? Anytime anyone asks about wisdom, the Buddha asked one of his disciples, Subhuti, who he considered to be one of the wisest disciples, to give a discourse on wisdom. In essence, looking at Shunyata, or the emptiness teachings. You know what Subhuti said?
Probably I know nothing.
He didn't even waste his breath to say, I know nothing. He just said nothing.
Yeah.
He sat down, said nothing, and the Buddha, in essence, patted him on the back, or whatever would be equivalent to that, and said, good job. Yeah. Right? So often, I remember years ago at the college group, like this one kid, he just was so determined to define wisdom, and I kept giving him this type of response, and he's busting out this Webster's, Merriam, whatever dictionary, and I'm like, who are they? Like, do they know what this stuff means? Like, how do words actually get in there? I was curious, but not the point right now. For me, I don't look at wisdom as a goal. Wisdom becomes the practice to overcome what? Ignorance. So let me ask you this, Theo. Do you know when you're being ignorant? Most of the time? Some of the time, do you know when you're being ignorant?
When I get told.
When you, come on. He said when he gets told. Well, right now you're being ignorant. Right? Do you know when you're being ignorant?
A lot.
Sometimes.
Okay. Good answer.
You don't ever know?
What? Well, that's a tough thing because a lot of people would, like, I would think that the whole point is that it's an unknown
Sure,
thing.
understood. I'm kind of messing with you, kind of serious, but let me rephrase the question. Do you ever do dumb things?
Hell yeah.
Hell yes. And when you're doing dumb things, do you know they're dumb things?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. So those sometimes that you know you're doing dumb things, stop doing those things. And if you stop doing, and this is where I was going with kind of the ignorance piece, if you stop doing the things that are ignorant, the dumb things that harm ourselves and others, by default, less dumb things equates to more wisdom. So that's why I say I don't look at wisdom as like trying to attain this enlightened state of wisdom. I know 9 out of 10 times. Again, yes, I give it to you. Sometimes we don't know, or we didn't figure it out till later. But very often, if you're aware, if you pay attention, you know, or at least you have enough dumb things you've been doing for a long time, you know before, during, and after. Stop doing those things. And that is wisdom. Work on that for a while, like 20 years. Yeah, just to get started. So, what else? Yeah.
Meditating with like loud noises in your environment.
That's a wonderful practice. The comment was, there wasn't even a question there, the comment was, meditating with loud noises in your environment. And then the question is how. So, loud noises in an environment is an incredible place to practice for many reasons. One, keeps you from falling asleep, right? 2, it brings you back, kind of like physical pain. I don't wish any sort of pain on anyone, but like I said, physical pain keeps you present. Loud noises keep you present, right? I've been doing meditation in prisons for 20 years. It's one of the most incredible places to do a practice because it is not calm, it is not quiet, it is not still, and it's quite maddening very often. And the ability to be with all of that is a wonderful practice. So what this really comes down to is if you take it out of just meditation, because for me as a practitioner, the seated or walking, whatever type of meditation you're doing, is really just a metaphor for everything else that's in our lives, right? So you refer to loud stuff during your meditation. Forget about meditation for a minute. Or let me go to meditation for a minute. When there's loud noise during meditation, you don't what? Like that.
Right.
And you don't want that. Do you have other things in your life that you don't like and you don't want?
Yes.
Have you learned to be with those things?
Sometimes.
Sometimes, you guys. Right? So the practice of meditation with noise is a wonderful practice to learn to let go of doing the one thing that so many people love, which is control. Do you like to try to control people and places and things? Sometimes I know, right? Or all the time. And our ability to stop trying to control people and places and things, one way to cultivate that ability, to strengthen that ability, to practice what I would consider wisdom, is to train the mind to be present. That's why going back to the question about the meditation with the eyes open, just sit and stare. And whatever is happening around you, that's what's happening, right? If it's running water, right? Beautiful sounds of running water, could be loud running water, could be birds chirping, could be chimes, right? People love peaceful loud noise. But maybe there's what you would call not peaceful loud noise.
Screaming kids.
Screaming kids. You know what that means? There's children. How beautiful are children?
I don't know.
I don't know. We've got enough time to get into this, but right? So kids are. The other thing about noise is, I'm just trying to determine where I want to go with this. Kids and adults are going to do what they're going to do. Kids scream. So do adults. So welcome it. Change your perception of the sound. In fact, there's a great, very few video recordings of Suzuki Roshi. I mentioned him earlier from the San Francisco Zen Center. And One of them is noise. He talks about noise versus sound. And it's really cool. It's from like, I don't know, 1960 or something like that. It's this black and white photo, or black and white video. And he's talking about the difference of noise versus sound. So even when we say the word noise, all of a sudden it has this negative perception. You're all just sounds. We label these sounds, and this is when you get into the Buddhist teachings on the Diamond Sutra, or the Heart Sutra, of duality, right? We get into this dualistic mind that likes to compare things, which is why we suffer. We like this, we don't like that. We want this, we don't want that. So these are just sounds that are happening. Don't label them as good or bad. Just recognize and have an awareness of what's happening. And then there's no problems. Yeah, it's so easy. Yeah.
On that same subject, I remember when I tried to do regular meditation practice, and I wanted to create the perfect space, and there's the candles, there's the this and that, and silence. And the quieter it got, in a way, the noisier it got. Because then all of a sudden I heard a dog 2 blocks away. That I just stopped trying. I learned that here, when you would say the world has sounds, deal with it, live with it, and then you just kind of. I remember once in a religious service that I went in, and like all the old men in the back were just talking about their vacations and stuff. So I went to the leader of the congregation. I said, they're so rude. He says, you're not praying enough. You're not concentrating on your prayer. Forget about that. This is the only time they see each other.
Yeah.
And they're the elders, they're respected. But
Sure.
just concentrate on your prayer. Get more into yourself. So putting all that together,
Definitely.
I found it easier to meditate.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I often say that, how do we know our silence isn't disturbing their noise, I do this, as you know, the Saturday 11 o'clock forever. And recently, it's kind of taken a little bit of a break. Maybe they were away, but, I do my little blah, blah for 8 or 10 minutes. And about 11:10, we start the meditation. And I felt like, for those of you here on Saturdays, for like 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row, sure enough, like 7 minutes in, neighbor comes out with the dog right there outside the window, and everybody in here would just listen to the dog get the bath. And we hear the guy walking, we hear the water running, we hear the dog shaking, and we're just listening to it. And so it eventually became this thing where at first it bothered people, or at least it annoyed them. And then for me, I was like, oh, where's the dog today? I almost missed the dog. So yeah, it's just like. What else? Thoughts, questions? So there's a question here that says, if nothing is right or wrong, what do you do when you feel disrespected? Or it's a lack of values, morals. I want to react and correct. It's always challenging when they come in via text, but when you say, I want to react and correct, I'm going to assume, and then it's period, I'm going to make the assumption, I could be wrong, clearly, wrong, that the rest of your sentence was going to be, I want to react and correct them. Yet, I get it, you don't want to be disrespected. But I think what you're saying is you want to correct them, yet the first part of your question is if nothing is right or wrong. So are you saying you correcting them is right because you feel disrespected? Now, I want to be very clear here anytime questions like this come up. Especially if you're new to Buddhist practice. Buddhist practice does not mean you become a doormat and you let people physically, mentally, emotionally abuse you. Those situations are toxic, unhealthy, and please keep yourself safe and remove yourself from any sort of domestic violence or assault type situations, right? So I always want to put the little asterisks out there before I say what I'm about to say, that if you find yourself in those situations, the Buddhist practice is not just to sit there and say, well, they're punching me, but I'm Buddhist. No, the practice is to remove yourself from that situation. But what helps is to understand that again, if you were here, and I'll ask you this even virtually, have you ever disrespected somebody? The answer to that is yes. Okay, we all have been there. Unless there's some angel or saint or light being in the room. We've all disrespected people before. And when we disrespect people, we do it because we're in pain and we are suffering. Yet all of a sudden we feel disrespected, and all of a sudden we want to correct the other person and tell them how wrong they are. Maybe they're being disrespectful towards you because they're hurting. I'm not saying that what they're doing is right or wrong. This practice isn't about defining right and wrong. It's about understanding intention behind everybody's actions. I talked about this, actually it's been a while, but very often there was one night a woman came in and she was sitting right over here, and question time came up, and before I even said any questions, her hand went up immediately, and she said that she was really hurting because her wife had just dropped her off, was really angry, and said lots of stuff to her, and she said that she wanted to know how she could feel better herself. And I said, well, hang on, wait a minute. Did you do something that caused your wife to feel pain? And she said, yeah. And I said, but you want me to give you the answer about how you can feel better when you hurt her? So this practice is to understand that in most cases, there's a dynamic that occurs that we play a big part in what leads to, not always, and again, that's where that asterisk comes in, but we play a big part in what potentially leads to somebody disrespecting us. Again, I'm not suggesting what they're doing is right, but understand what and why they're doing it. And this is where the practice of compassion comes in, especially when it's people you love, people you care about, people you know, people you're going to be with or around. When you have compassion for them, you begin to understand them, you begin to feel their pain. Because when we have disrespected people, when we have lashed out at people, when we have yelled at people, it's because we are hurting. And what we need at that moment is not somebody to yell at us and tell us how wrong we are. We need love and compassion ourselves. Because we're just big kids, still screaming for help. So, with safety in mind, my response is always in those situations, be with it as much as possible and try to understand it. If it's someone that you don't interact with, you don't have to deal with them, then maybe you can just remove yourself from that situation. But if it's someone that you're interacting with, or you work with, or a family member, a loved one, whatever it might be, then don't make it about you. Make it about them. Yeah.
That just made me think, Jeff, I always say, well, in Buddhist practice, they say there's no, all of your views are wrong, all of your points of view are wrong. And it reminded me so much, it might have been you, I don't remember, but someone told me that we all kind of have our own handbooks.
Yeah.
And we think that, if someone doesn't follow the rules of our handbook, then they're right or wrong or whatever. And that kind of ties back to what you always say that your teacher taught you about expect nothing from no one. And it's kind of like we have our own handbook, which is our point of views, and if someone has a different handbook, we expect them to follow ours,
Totally.
but we don't think that they have their own handbook. So
Yeah. The teaching comes from, and I like the handbook thing. I like it. Wasn't me, but I think
there's no therapist. I don't know.
it's a therapist.
Sounds like fair.
Sound. Yeah. And I often joke and say half the people in here are in therapy, the other half are therapists. So half the therapists are in therapy. So we're all in this together. Keep your therapists. But yeah, the handbook thing is great. It wasn't me. The teaching is the Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching on where he says nirvana is freedom from views. Nirvana is cessation of, freedom from views, cessation of suffering. And so how can we be free from views? And for me, the practice, as I learned, has always been to expect nothing from anyone ever. And then you're not attached to your handbook, in essence, goes away. You don't even have a handbook anymore. Try that one on your therapist. Right? Because if your handbook vanishes, then you become an observer of reality. And this, I believe, is what the Buddha was trying to get us to see. Nowhere close to knowing what that's like, but I truly, deeply believe that that's what this practice is, to observe each moment as it arises without any judgment. But on a practical, logical sense, yes, we all have our own handbook and we're going to judge everybody by our handbook, for sure, until the handbooks fall away. Yeah.
So one thing I struggle with is just how much like violence and suffering is happening all over the world.
Yeah.
By it. So I hear what you're saying with the handbook thing, but when you look at like the carnage that we're subjected to every day, what advice do you have on how to reconcile that?
Work your ass off to change it. Yeah, there's so much just racial, social, economic, political injustice in the world. It's disgusting. That's what my handbook says. And again, I look at the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, who's really kind of coined the phrase, if you've never heard this, it's called engaged Buddhism. Have you heard that? So it's called engaged Buddhism. And the idea is to look at social, racial, economic, political injustice in the world, and with the lens of compassion and wisdom, or less ignorance, right? With that lens, go into the world and create change. So I appreciate pointing that out, because it's an opportunity for me to kind of drive home the fact that this is not about sitting back. When the handbook disappears, it's not about not caring. It's actually caring about everything and everyone, but not being so attached to your way, which doesn't mean that what's going on is okay. The world is, yes, it's on fire. And it's just, it's painful to watch. But can we do our best? For me as a practitioner, this is what to your question, this is my recommendation, suggestion as a practice is, can I do whatever is within my power to listen and try to understand all views, all perceptions, all handbooks, without just shutting people down? Because much of our interaction, and this I wasn't sure if I was even going to say this, but I'll say it anyways. Much of our interaction on a day-to-day basis, sitting here in San Diego, and our own level of privilege that many of us have in one way or the other. I have all of it, right? Many things for many people in this room are okay relative to what you're talking about, is my guess. And at the same time, so much of our arguments and fights and anger and hatred is towards these same people that are in this room. I promise you, the people that you're arguing with and that you hate and that piss you off on social media, they are in this room. But in places like this, in what's called Sangha, in community, this is where you want to create a safe space to be able to listen and understand. Because everyone in this room doesn't have the same, we don't talk politics, we don't talk religion, but everyone in this room doesn't have the same political views. That's a shocker often to people. But I know most of the people who come here, and people have all kinds of views. But if you can open your heart and mind and try to listen and understand, right? I often say I wish every racist would show up here to an intro to Buddhism and meditation class. I want to sit with them and understand why they are the way they are. Because if we don't understand, we can't create change. Otherwise, we're taking the same level of hatred that we are seeing from them, and we're just throwing it back at them. So, engaged Buddhism is an incredible practice, a very difficult practice. he walked alongside and taught a lot with Thich Nhat Hanh, a lot with Martin Luther King. And he had actually nominated Thich Nhat Hanh for a Nobel Peace Prize for his work. So be active. I think Buddhist practice is very much a activist, rebellious practice, because it's you have to be pretty active and rebellious to actually live with nothing but peace and love in your heart. It's a pretty difficult thing to do. So, yeah. And if you do that, you're just going to annoy a lot of people anyway, so it'll be fine. So, all right, so I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those around the world who need it most. May all beings be at peace and free from suffering. All right, before you all head out, our Dharma Bum host Molly has a few announcements for you all.
Hi everyone. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They're simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 5 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it, then bring it back whenever you are done. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. The windows are closed, so we don't have to latch them. Thank you all for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you again.
Thanks, Molly. And we did change for winter time the food distribution to 4:30, so we'll update that. Sorry. So 4:30 Thursdays. Thank you all. Thanks, Molly.